Hey guys, welcome back. Yesterday, I posted my week one offensive line grades and review video. We did those all of last year. And like I told you during the preseason videos, you're going to find defensive film review and breakdown videos each week of the 2025 season here with our new contributor, Anthony Testino. So, Anthony, I know you and I were on the same page going into this game where we felt like it's week one and anything can happen. And I know you also shared some wacky scores from week one of last year for other teams, but I don't think that either of us expected it to be as lopsided against us as it was on Sunday. And I also know that we are on the same page that we still acknowledge that it was week one and anything could have happened. So I've been saying that, I feel like we're going to find out a lot more in week two, and then I'm not sounding the alarm on this team yet. So before we get into the defensive film review, I just wanted to give you a chance to give your overall thoughts on what we saw 2 days ago in Indianapolis.
What's up, Eric? Thanks for having me, buddy.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of feel the same way. Maybe we were a little more prepared for it, but again, still surprised by how bad it got and how bad it looked. And I don't want to go on forever, but some of the things that that bothered me last year that I thought maybe like should have been fixed, like going into this season regarding, Mike McDaniel and just basically what I think the team should look like and how, they should go about certain things, and things need to be fixed. And it's like, they're still there, and it bothers me because it's never going to be fixed. And that to me is very worrisome. So I will say, I know again, everybody's kind of jumping off the cliff, and we're on the side of, hey, again, pump the brakes a little bit, at least for now. But I understand where everybody's coming from, and I will say, like, more than ever, I am worried. I think, lastly, like, I ask myself, it's going to go one of two. It's going to go one of two ways, right? It's either going to get turned around or it's not.
Yep.
And I said, okay, well, what gives me confidence that it would turn around? And the roster. Like, I do like the roster aside from a couple spots, right? But they're manageable if the other positions around them step up and do what we expect them to do, right? We're worried about corner if pass rush steps up. We're worried about tight end. Why? If the offensive line, receiver, just the mix of thing, right? If we get Waller, those kind of things, like some of it can be cleaned up. And then what worries me about this downward spiral that could potentially happen and guys just quitting and this whole thing imploding, it is Mike McDaniel and the things that I'm still seeing that I just feel like it's getting old. And I got to know if we feel that way. The players even though it's like they're the ones that are making the mistakes on the field, they still have to feel like this is the same stuff, So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think the most frustrating part for a lot of fans is, not even necessarily the score, just that it was a lot of the same stuff that we've seen in the past, whether it was not being able to get up to the line on time, right? Whether it was tight ends eating us up, mobile quarterbacks eating us up, injuries hit us early. I think you might get into a little more of that later, but let's dive into the defensive film review portion, and then we'll see where we end up at the end of this video.
Cool. We could have realistically just played the entire first half and just sat here and watched it, but we'll hit on a couple, and again, we'll breeze through them. I saw, again, I know I acknowledge that Twitter was loaded with tape, so I know a lot of this stuff is going to be repetitive. So, but we'll dive into it a little bit, and we'll at least acknowledge it exists. So. First clip, bud, we'll start right in the first quarter. I could start earlier, but we'll start at 12:52. This was actually one that I showed on Twitter And I've seen a couple of different people say maybe it's something in some sort of cover two, or maybe it's split field and it's cover six. Um, I don't really know. I'm not going to say I know for sure. I thought it was four personally, but regardless, it doesn't matter because most of it really doesn't change that what happened here. You see Storm there at the top of the screen, who had just a really rough day, and all of our worst nightmares kind of coming, true. But yeah, so I want to make this clear too, because I don't know if I've seen this, but the Colts are in 13 personnel. 13. There's three tight ends on the field, even though, it's tough to tell there, but this is three tight ends and one receiver. So the guy that Storm is carrying borderline into Minkah's lap is Andrew Ogletree. I don't know about you guys, but I was not really worried about Andrew Ogletree going into this game. So the fact that he felt the need to carry him borderline to Minkah's lap because he's such a threat, leaving Tyler Warren open, was baffling to me. Again, these are, just football 101 kind of, mistakes. And we talked about this when we watched Rasul's tape, right? Where we watched him kind of, carry a guy, drop it, see the flat, but see the guy come, right? That's the kind of stuff, you get from a veteran. This is the kind of stuff you get from a guy that's not comfortable, familiar, and inexperienced. And, I like Storm. Seems like a good dude, good kid, and the fact that he was a UDFA and made the team, that's great. You commend him for that. But he's probably not very good, but that's the world we live in. So yeah, this one bothered me, but again, there was a lot of this and it was all over, and he wasn't the only one that played bad. So next clip I got is 3:04, still first quarter. So this is a 2nd and 9. Miami's in their nickel package here. And, this to me was it was bad tackling. Colts overloaded this side with 4 eligibles here. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, Jonathan Taylor didn't even move. He just stood there. And, he's kind of the outlet check down if all else fails. And I got to say, maybe I kind of understood what Jason Marshall was doing, kind of, like protecting against anything that was going to, come out to the sideline. So maybe he's a little late to getting to the flat if you really watch the route, right? But there's bodies there. And again, he's a guy that's new to the position, right? So I mean, there's definitely a lack of feel, and this is his first game. They're on the road, like it's not the easiest environment. But the Colts came out with this kind of overload, look a couple times, and I just kept thinking to myself, like, there's got to be some sort of check, that we can get into, maybe, because if those end up being vertical routes, we're in trouble, and when you overload a side like that, I think that there's got to be some sort of check, and it just, I don't know. I just felt like the Dolphins defense was just out there going through the motions as if it was like a practice that they didn't want to be at. It just felt like nobody drove on the ball. Nobody attacked anything really with any kind of intensity or like excitement that they could make a play. Guys like waited for the ball and a decision to be made before they reacted instead of kind of anticipating anything. I feel like everybody was watching the quarterback's eyes and, not even acknowledging what the routes were and trying to say, okay, this guy's doing that. So likelihood is the other guy's going to do this, so let me react that way. It was all over the tape. And you said, you look at the breakdown, like, the tackle, and just, it was non-existent. It was, when it
Yeah,
happened, I yelled at the TV, what are we doing?
yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be, a defensive guru by any means, right? But as an offensive line coach, right, I watch the way that our defensive coaches handle stuff at the high school level, and when we send a guy in motion here, right, we're constantly on our linebackers to shift and bump alignments. And what I see here, when Taylor goes in motion, nobody is moving at all other than Jack Jones going out there. So now we have Jack Jones with Jonathan Taylor out here, the two receivers in here with just Jason Marshall, and there's no adjustment at all. Like we've got three guys over here with one eligible. So, just seems like a lack of adjustment there. And then the other thing that I noticed as that video is playing through, watch Chop Robinson here. And this is out of character for him, right? He drops into coverage, which is fine. But when this ball is thrown, like, what the hell is he doing?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was all over the tape.
Not there mentally.
Yeah, and that's it makes and I mean he's his own man, right? So when we look at that, we say, Chop, that's on you. You decide how much effort you're going to give. Now my question is why? Why is it are we done here with what we have in place as far as coaching and that, and it's just falling on deaf ears now and it's time for change? Or just again, why? That's the answer that we really need, because I think that will tell us everything we need to know about why this performance happened. And we'll see if it carries over again, because there might be a very big underlying story going on, because they smiled in our faces all off season telling us they love each other and culture, where I don't know. That doesn't look like good team culture to me. That doesn't look like you're, fighting for the guy next to you to me. But next one I got, we'll go to quarter two. This is first play, actually, 15-minute mark. So this actually happened right after Chubb had a sack, and there's a holding penalty, and they ended up being 2nd and 20. And we all know what happened here. This is Storm with literally no one else threatening him. I understand if like his responsibilities, like, it's the flat, but when you have no one, like, this is football 101 for everybody. Like, when you have no one threatening you, continue to get depth and find work. It's just like an offensive lineman, right? I was planning on blocking this guy. He did this or dropped into coverage. What do? You don't stand there and, say, all right, I get this one off, right? You look for work. You try to clean up somebody. You do something. And
yeah, like you said, situational football there. Like it's 2nd and 20. If this was 3rd and 5 or something like that, I could maybe understand not carrying it as far because you don't want, somebody leak out of the backfield and have what we had on the last play there. But we're, 20 yards to go and he's guarding nothing there. But sorry to interrupt you there.
No, it's okay. I'm glad, but you're 100%, it's true. And for anybody, I mean, again, this is on Storm, and if you watch Iffy in the back here, he's gonna commit to Warren as he bends, his vertical back inside, and that's his job when he's out there and he's in too high like that. He's supposed to read from the inside out. So if Warren goes vertical, that's where Iffy's supposed to be. So I mean, there's no discrepancies about whose issue this was, and it was on Storm again. So again, he had a really tough day, exposed very, very quickly.
And so let me ask you this, because I kind of had the feeling throughout the game that it felt like on both sides of the ball that Miami was being outcoached. The Colts were constantly throwing into the Dolphins blitzes. We have a cover 2 here, and if Iffy's responsibility, as you're saying, is to play inside out on this, right? Then is this just Shane Steichen recognizing what coverage the Dolphins are in, getting Daniel Jones into the right play, and knowing that he can pull that safety off and to get that play over the top? Like, I mean,
So,
okay. No, go ahead.
No, it's really interesting you say that, though, because I mostly I have the timestamps and I write down what went on during the play and the situation, but I also make like side notes, and I try to bring them up when possible. I mean, I wrote down and I'll get to kind of what you said, but in general, I wrote down zero pass rush, which we all know. Said it looked like there were multiple times where the ends were being asked to contain, as if, like, I know Daniel Jones has legs and has some mobility, but let's make this guy prove it first. Let's see if Indy even wants to use that. They're trying to rebuild a quarterback here. Maybe they don't, maybe they really want him to play from the pocket before they get into that stuff. So let's not assume that that's just going to happen. You're taking away some of our better players, their best attribute. I wrote down that the zones are just too safe. They're too soft. I said it just looked like guys are not driving on the ball. It looked like they're too far away. There's a lot of routes and plays where guys are just being unchallenged, where it's like, we could probably use you, rushing the passer or doing something different. It didn't, like, to me, there was no disguises. Like, yeah, there was movement post snap, but like nobody's moving and making Daniel think about, is this guy coming up in the A gap? Is he doing anything? The corner was playing 10 yards off, but now he's up in a press before the snake. There's none of that. It just looked like this is the play call. We're going to walk out and stand in our spot, and they're going to snap the ball, and then we run to where we're supposed to be, and that's it. And that's not good. That's not how you play defense. Defense, you need to play with intensity. You need to play with a very, very high motor, high effort, and alert. Just all of it. And it's like we brought none of that to the table. And then again, too, I wrote down, like, again, I just seemed like guys were doing nothing but watching eyes, and it was just tunnel vision where nothing else, existed, and they didn't pay attention to route concepts and trying to figure out what was coming. It's just there was times people were up in press and we're not getting our hands on. There's times that we're just flat out giving guys free releases from the slot when there was opportunity to get hands on. It's just really bad, man. But so lastly, what kind of you were saying though, but that I wanted to touch on was, like, did they just get really lucky with their play calls? Because it seemed like they had the perfect play calls a lot for what we were doing, where it made me, I wrote down, like, it made me question, like, has Anthony Weaver, like, tendencies? Are they blatant? Or did they just really, I mean, a lot of these coverages I saw in preseason, I'll say that it was a lot of the same stuff, nothing crazy, nothing exotic. I mean, the most exotic stuff was a couple inverted cover twos, and that was about it. So, I mean, it almost appeared like, I'm sure you guys, like, being at the high school level, probably have run, similar plays all game for, first through fourth quarter. Just, yeah, not good, very vanilla. It made me question the same thing. Steichen have his number, or know exactly what they were doing. Like, it was bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's keep going. What else do you got for us today?
So next one we can move on to, we'll stay in the second quarter. Let's go 4:14. And this is a quick one. This is just one thing that I mentioned just before was, you get Storm up here. He's top of the screen. He ends up on, Adonai Mitchell. And if we're impressed, why are we not? Or if we're in press position, why are we going to give a free release? All you're doing is making your job harder. Because then now you have to turn and run immediately with this guy who is a burner. I mean, Mitchell, he's fast. And instead of being an off coverage and giving yourself some cushion. And again, yeah, I mean, listen, good throw, good timing, all that stuff. Like, those get complete. I don't have too much of an issue. Like, again, those guys get paid too. Sometimes they're going to, it's a good play. But I just things that don't make sense every single play. Why are we impressed if we're not going to get our hands on, the receiver?
So when they're looking at this, right? Because you got a single safety, right? It looks like, a cover one, and man coverage. Do they discuss pre-snap or through the week which way this safety's opening up, right? Because to me, it seems like they're kind of leaving Jack Jones on a little more of an island than what they are Storm Duck on the top side of this here. If I can get to play again, like Minkah's kind of drifting that way, and it feels like Storm can play that comeback a little more than what he is. Like he almost feels like he's in a panic to get deep and overruns it there, or am I just
Usually, if a corner is like trailing, or playing like trail technique, because he knows he's got some help over the top. That's usually done in cover two. And as far as Minkah turning, I mean, I don't know. Again, we don't know what's being taught exactly. There could be reasons for something. He could be turning field side. He could be turning, the short side of the field. It could be a Storm versus Jack thing. It could be, matchup based. That's the tough part, right? Like I say, we're doing our best to kind of figure things out and, play detective here on this. So,
right.
I can't say that I definitively have a good answer for you as far as like why he's doing that. But I mean, it would make sense. I know I have a little bit more faith in Jack Jones than I do Storm Duck, and this game did it no favors. But yeah, it's just I just feel like again, it's some of these things like you're setting yourself up for failure like before the play even begins. I don't know. Like Storm to me, right, is a little bit more of a bigger fit. Like I don't want to say bigger, but he's a little bit more. He wants to be physical. Like use it. If you're gonna go up there, use it. Like do what you do. Play in your comfort zone. But
Right.
I don't know. Next one I got is 1354. And this is just a quick, this is like a sit and flat concept. But the problem is they hit us for probably, I believe it was 4 or 5 times in this game. All that concept. I mean, they ate us alive in the flat. And guy in this situation, it's Jack. Like being that the ball's on the right hash, there's a little bit more space over there on the left. Like you gotta, again, this is one of those situations where you gotta bust your ass to get out there and get out there a little bit, quicker. So that way you maintain the leverage on the receiver. Otherwise, that's what happens. You give up the edge, and turns into a chunk play. A ball that traveled, 3 yards in the air turned into 20 yards for catch and run by Mo Alley Cox. I mean, this is it's just bad. It's discouraging, but yeah, it's same thing, like peeking inside. I don't know if it's, is it watching the eyes? Is it forgetting responsibility? Is it trying to make a play too much? But, this is where like, okay, listen, he's running a 4 or 5 yard sit, like not even. Let your linebacker, let him take care of that. That's his job. I believe it's T Dot. His job is to see that and then react to it. Let him do that. You go worry about the flat and do your job. But everybody needs to speed it up and get to where they need to be a hell of a lot quicker than they were doing on Sunday. But yeah, again, that concept was run and beat us probably. I feel comfortable saying 4 times. I think it might even been 5.
Gotcha.
So, 1241 will show the first positive note that I had, and it's really not a huge deal, but again, it was the first positive, and when I caught it live, I was happy. Trader's a guy that it seemed like they had big plans for very early on, and we didn't get a chance to see a ton of them in preseason, but there was just breadcrumbs there, kind of like they think they have something. So for me, like for him cleaning this up and again saving a touchdown on that play, I just thought it was a good play. Like that's how you tackle. Everyone else needs to bring that with them this upcoming Sunday. So again, nothing. I mean, I think they ended up scoring on touchdown the next play or 2, whatever it was. But like I said, for me, it was just like, okay, so this is part of what they're seeing in this kid, which
Yeah,
I
definitely.
don't want to say we're there yet, but at some point, if the season goes bad, This is all we're going to be doing, is looking for the young guys that are making plays and worth being here as time goes on, and new regime and all that kind of stuff. So next one was 404. Again, nothing crazy. This is just man coverage. Rasul's at the bottom of the screen. It's going to trail him, and then Pittman kind of starts to settle down, as if, like, realistically, as a receiver, what you're taught is if it's zone, sit it down and find the gap. If it's man, keep running. So this is more on Pittman making the wrong decision and allowing Rasul to get in there to even make that play. I mean, he should have just continued on and carry the route. But again, Rasul's been in the building for a week. We saw this when we broke him down, that man coverage, maybe not, especially on drags. I think, there was a couple that I saw watching his tape where he got beat on. So, again, just another positive. I would have loved to have seen him, make that play and pick the ball off. But it was nice to see somebody actually knock the ball down and not be caught. We were really at that level.
Yeah, and this kind of, I think that a lot of times when you look at football games, there are a few plays that you can single out that could have changed the momentum of the game. And even in very lopsided games, like, it's hard to say, these 3 plays could have made a difference, right? But if Rasul catches this on the go, this is 7 points the other way, no doubt, right?
I agree.
You've got the running into the kicker was a huge one. I think they gave up a pretty simple. I think Chop gave up a third down conversion on, or no, it was Chop jumped off sides on that same drive on a third down play, and then they gave up the reception, right? So, as bad as the score was, right, there are these breadcrumbs of plays in there that if we just finish them, then we're at least back in the game. But let's keep going here.
But you're right, not to spend too much time on it. You're right. There's, like you said, there's a couple plays that can really change, maybe not outcomes, but they change the way the game, is played and the momentum. And then all you want to do is give yourself a chance in the fourth quarter. And, he makes that play, a couple other guys make another play. Maybe it's a different ball game, or at least we feel a little bit different about what we're going into week 2 thinking, So we'll go to 353. And this is another one here where, this is I saw cover 4 again. I mean, I'm sure maybe some other people are going to have different opinions, but I don't know what we're doing. We have help inside, and it's just like we just completely neglect the outside receiver, which is his responsibility. And this ends up being, I think, on a free play. If I'm not mistaken. There you go. Right. So this
was 3rd and 10.
Yep.
And Chop jumps off sides, and we give up an easy first down.
Yep. But if you go back, I mean, just watch, like, the slot here, he gets carried vertically, and you have safety help. I believe it's him, and then the other guy's bending it back toward the other safety and linebacker. So again, I mean, just like he doesn't even look at him, like he's just like he doesn't exist. Like, I don't know what we're doing. Like, our eyes are not in the right place. We're not covering the right people in our zones. We're just completely disregarding anything that I guarantee has been taught. So, I mean, at some point, I'm sure Anthony Weaver in his head was quietly throwing his hands up and just saying, I don't know what, to do or what we're doing. And then, well, I got 2 more we'll touch on real quick. We'll go to 242. So Daniel Jones here makes a check at the line and goes, max protect here. And this is on 4th and 2. So he ends up getting the matchup he wants, which is, we're talking about 2 yards that they need. And I have iffy here, playing, I think from, I counted about 12, 13 yards away.
Yeah.
Come downhill and try to make a play on this. I mean, again, remember when we talked about, one of our last videos we did where it was, I'd like to see the easy things, you know, become a little more difficult. I mean, we're making, fourth and twos or kind of high pressure situations. We're making those easy. We're doing the opposite. It's head scratching to me. And I mean, tip of the cap to Daniel Jones for reading whatever he read and making the adjustment. But I mean, you gotta start creeping or doing something here, and get yourself in better position and understand what the situation is. Set yourself up for success. By your alignment, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I don't get what Iffy is doing here, right? There is disguising coverages, and then there is whatever Iffy is doing here. Like, Daniel Jones, he obviously saw something because he, got some alignment adjustments here. But, from the beginning of this play, Iffy knows that he is man coverage on this slot receiver because Marshall is coming off the edge, right? And I get kind of moving around a little bit. And even here, like, I don't mind him there, but what is he doing jumping to the inside? Like, it's
And
almost
that,
like Daniel Jones knew
yeah,
exactly what was coming. And as soon as if he jumped to the inside, right, then we're hitting the out there and he's got no chance at it. Like, I don't you can
yeah,
disguise coverage without running in the wrong direction at the snap of the ball.
yes, that was the other thing too, right? Was just the simple fact that like it was going to be difficult for him to get there and break on that and make a play on the ball. And you were literally moving the opposite direction at the snap. Like, what? Why? What are we doing? That's all I can keep asking. It's just because I literally don't understand. If there were, if I could see reasons why we were doing things, and I'm sure there are, but I guarantee you they're not any good ones because this is rough.
Yeah.
And the last one we'll get into, we'll take a look at, we'll go to 4:30. This is third quarter. If we haven't moved over already. Okay, so real quick, this is a one-man route. One. Everyone else is in protection or, running and following through on the play fake. For me, again, staring at the eyes like Minkah, that ball needs to be his. Like there's nothing else. Like if he got double moved, I wouldn't even have cared because at least Minkah would have looked like he was trying to make a play. I have no words for it. This is a one-man route. Rasul, again, it's too quick to really truly understand what the coverage is. It's too high. Both of them go into a back pedal. I assume it's either two, 4, two man. I really am not positive. It's, again, too hard to tell. But okay, Rasul kind of let him go to the inside where he does have help, and especially with Minkah's like pre-snap alignment and depth. You're Minkah Fitzpatrick. Like I would have been chomping at the bit for an opportunity like that in this kind of game, to do something. And the fact that got completed, like if you show it from the end zone angle, like it's even worse.
Right.
It just doesn't look good.
Yeah, I mean, this looks to me like an RPO, right? Where Daniel Jones is reading uh Jordan Brooks right here, and when Brooks steps up, right, we're pulling and throwing. But like you said, like what is Rasul Douglas doing? Like there's nothing else coming to the outside here. He's clearly not going to chase us down from the backside. So, you know, why aren't we following that a little more? Right? There's nothing, no threat here. And Minkah, right? Like you said,
Yep.
he's just kind of standing there. Like if I would understand it more if they saw the run action and he was flying like a bat out of hell trying to fill a backside lane, right? But he's just kind of sitting back on his heels and just letting that be completed. I mean, honestly, they're probably lucky it didn't turn into a 70-yard touchdown here,
Yeah. Yeah.
with the way that he was sitting when that ball was caught.
Yeah, the only I agree with you too. The only other thing that like I had in my head at the time was like, okay, so the tight end, is coming across the formation. Maybe he was seeing if he was going to leak flat and if we were going to have to adjust. And I don't know if that's like, if that turns into, Minkah has two on that side, which would have been him. He's got to get to the flat, or Rasul is kind of, peeping it where he's going to release, the receiver to Minkah, and then he's going to turn and go get flat. But again, he ends up being a block. It's just not good enough. It's not good enough. I mean, it was one of many. So yeah, again, we could have watched the entire game, picked any play for the most part. There was very little positives. I mean, a couple guys played well. I watched a little bit of, some of the offense, and I tried to pay attention to what I was seeing circulating around. Patrick Paul played, pretty well, right? So I was happy about that. That's a big relief just as far as the Dolphins and their future, right? And then there's a couple other little things, but I mean, it needs to be a gut check time, look in the mirror time, figure it out, whatever we got to do. It needs to get done. It needs to get done now. And again, I think we all need to understand what the ceiling is here. With when you really go through and look, the running back situation, right? The tight end situation. I mean, we were going into this game basically with two and had to elevate Jeff Wilson, who we just picked up, right? The corners. The fact that Tyreek hasn't, him and Tua haven't logged as many reps as usual. Austin Jackson just got back, and now apparently is gone again. James Daniels, now is hurt. So again, like, go up and down. I encourage everyone go up and down the roster and really think about each guy's kind of journey to where they're at and what their off season looks like, and ask yourself like how high of expectations can you kind of have for each position group, at least until they've had time to play. Where again, you and I are kind of on the same page where there's going to be bumps and bruises and growing pains early on. And I think it's going to be even a little bit worse than that, and not just based on the Colts game. Like, thought maybe that there'd be a little bit, again, more to it because of kind of the things I just said, right? Like, it wasn't the cleanest off season. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully they can save face until, later on.
Let me ask you this, Anthony. So offensively, with James Daniels going down that first drive, I felt like it really changed what the offense was capable of. Keon Smith had a really rough game offensively. But when we look at it from a defensive perspective, we knew the secondary was probably going to have to be fairly vanilla, especially, Jason Marshall Jr. coming in there, all new safety crew, Storm Duck being the only one to really return. And then you lose Storm Duck fairly early in the game as well. Do you feel like they almost had to go even more vanilla in their coverages, and maybe even that made it easier on the Colts, where, do you feel like they had to go more basic? Like, you talked about them doing a lot of the same stuff in the preseason. Did they lose some of that when they lost their most tenured secondary player?
To be honest with you, I really don't think too much changed because I mean, I know, Rasul, just got there, but it's not like they weren't doing very much exotic anyway, and again, there's always like, I would trust a guy like Minkah to communicate too, if need be, with the Rasul. I mean, it's two veterans that have logged some, heavy snaps. So yeah, I can't say that I really believe it changed too much. To me, it really just looks like there's a lot of guys that don't know how to play zone. And I don't know if, it makes me wonder like what Weaver's thinking, is it said behind closed doors, this is not enough, just so you guys know. Like, don't expect the world, like, making it clear what everyone else's, inside the building expectations should be? Or is he, signing off and saying like, oh no, I can work with this, because no, I don't know if you can. And I don't get me wrong, I think it can look a hell of a lot better. Um, but it was bad, and I just don't know if some of these guys are the best fit, for what they are trying to do. And I'm not quite sure that this is what they even want to do. This might just be happening by like default because it's like, you can play Jack Jones maybe because he's got the athletic ability to do kind of anything in coverage. Whether he's gonna play well or not is a whole different story. But like, okay, like how much are you really gonna trust Storm Duck in man coverage? How much are you gonna trust Jason Marshall in man coverage from the slot? As a rookie, how much are you going to trust Iffy? Again, like we all look back and say like, yeah, he was a corner in college and has experience, but like I don't know, is that what you really want to be doing, covering slot receivers? I don't know, they just seem like such a uncoordinated mess right now that I really like. The picture is just so choppy that we really need to see things kind of play out a little bit more before I think we get an idea of what this team's gonna be, And I think they're doing that too. And I think all teams are. It's week one, but for this team, they got a lot more questions than some other teams.
All right, and so I'll take me to my next question I had for you. Again, watching offensive film, there were a lot of things that I felt should be cleaned up just by being able to watch the film. I know there was, one specific, Dolphins were running a duo to the right, and Savaiinaya was not on the same page with Patrick Paul. Patrick Paul went out to a corner that was coming off the edge. Jonah did not go out to the defensive end, so the defensive end had a free run. Right, that's the kind of stuff that as a coach I say, yeah, that sucked that happened. Right, but we're talking about a rookie left guard. But that's something that I can, on the plane ride home, I can sit there and put that video on and say, what happened here call wise? How can we fix this so that week 2 we get this fixed? Watching the defensive film that we did here today, there was not a single play in there. Well, maybe one, maybe the Rasul Douglas almost pick where he was, basically beaten in man coverage. But everything else that I saw felt like it was more communication, technique, um, that type of stuff. It wasn't players
Mental.
just getting physically beat, right? So, is there some encouragement that it's not like they were just running it down the Dolphins' throat and blowing Kenneth Grant 10 yards off the ball, or we were constantly just seeing corners getting beat in man coverage. So, is there a little bit of optimism that they can go into the film room and they can get some of this cleaned up heading into week 2?
Yeah, I think you said it well, where a lot of it's mental, right? And if it's mental, it means it's fixable. I mean, you guys can't get taller, they can't get faster, they can't do those kinds of things. But if it's mental and we're not in the right spots, or we're not understanding what our adjustment is when we get this route concept or this formation alignment by receivers, whatever it is, yeah, that stuff's fixable with film work and being laser focused. And that's what they have to bank on, because if they don't, again, it's not like they have the most physically gifted guys either, right? So, I mean, this room really, really needs to, if anything, they need to be smart if they're going to have any sort of success. And it's, they need help, obviously, with, the safeties, which is a little bit more of I just only say a little bit just because of Minkah, really, but the D line needs to help, tremendously. The linebackers need to help, a lot, right? I mean, kind of pick up the slack almost. But yeah, it's, they need to bank on, and they need to know what they're doing, and they need to at least, at least know their assignments and be in the right spots. And give them easy stuff by making mental mistakes. If a guy beats you or this and that, you tip your cap and say, "Hey, that's the best I got." I think we could all live with that, but yeah, not the case.
So,
Too many mistakes.
all right. So heading out here, quick question, right? You get the left and the right side of the answer here. As we're heading into week 2, what is something that we can look at that we can see in week 2 that we can feel a little more encouraged about the way the season could go? And what is something that, if this happens in week 2, then, then maybe it may be time to sound some alarms that this is going to be a trend versus just a wacky week 1 lopsided score.
Are you talking defensively or are you talking from the team in general?
Let's stick to the defensive side of it.
Yeah, just less mental mistakes, right? I mean, I'd like to see guys a little bit closer. I'd like to see maybe, guys being feisty. I'd like to see the tackling, get better when the opportunities arise. Just not so many open guys where the only guy in the screen is a Colts, receiver, or in this case it'll be a Patriots receiver. I mean, the bottom line is they were so bad that improvement's not going to be hard to see, so that's really all we're looking for. If it's very similar, like, if it's anything close to what we just saw, and they look like they just are going through the motions again, and there's just lackadaisical, and we're gonna be in trouble.
Yeah. And I do have one more after that then. I've counted Mike McDaniel out before, right? He's a quirky guy. He's not the guy that me or you would picture as the ideal head coach, leader of men, alpha male type of guy. But there's been multiple times in the past where it felt like the team had the opportunity to fall apart, and he's done a good job of keeping them together, right? But I know that he is very much on the hot seat in the view of fans right now. But did Anthony Weaver do anything in week 1 that would tell you that, even if things do fall apart, that it makes sense to go to Anthony Weaver? Like if his defense is struggling as bad as it was, and we saw, some questionable effort things, right? Does it make sense to even consider? And I don't really want to get into a whole conversation of whether or not they should move on from Mike McDaniel here in week 1, right? But if we sat here today, do you still have the same confidence in Anthony Weaver being a head coach as we did heading into training camp, essentially?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, no, not from this week or this tape, but I think you can just look at Anthony Weaver for who he is and ask yourself, what do I think would change? I think probably being a player and just getting to know the guy, I guess, for the last couple of years. Maybe guys would be a little bit more accountable, or he would make them a little more accountable. Again, if that's still a problem behind closed doors, we again can only speculate in the seats that we sit in. Maybe there's a philosophy change where he says, instead of trying to score 40 points, or let's run the ball, and I want more of a physical back. Maybe he says, I want Ollie Gordon back there because I want to pound the rock, control the clock, help out my defense, and keep them off the feet. So you never know. Guys, you can't do too much. We're in season now, but those are the kind of things you have to wonder and question. Like, would that change? Is that worth moving on to? Is it worth seeing? And who knows? Maybe it could be the simple fact it's like addition by subtraction too, where it's guys are just tired of hearing Mike McDaniel's voice and the same cliche stuff over and over. Where getting that voice out of the building might, or at least out of players' heads, might just be refreshing on its own. It's questions, again, more stuff that we can only speculate because we're not in the building, but might be worth a shot.
Anthony, I love talking to you because every time that we go through this, like I keep saying last question, right? But your response there kind of led me to another question. And again, like I hate even talking about Mike McDaniel being out the door after week one. I'm not saying that I want
I'm
that,
not there either
but
yet.
but in a way, if things do continue to turn south, has Mike McDaniel almost dug his grave by bringing in Bobby Slowick as one of his assistants? Because when you do that, like somebody that has been a head coach, has been known for his offense, right? Now, if you make that decision to transfer to Anthony Weaver, you have a guy that, is no longer at the head of the table that can call the same plays that McDaniel is, and we don't have to change the offense. So, as much as we looked at Slowick as being an aid to the offense, does he also serve as, a possible successor to McDaniel calling the plays if they do make that change?
I mean, as far as like the hierarchy goes, I don't know. Frank Smith's been there, for a while. I think, and I think they might lean maybe more in that direction. He seems to be a guy well respected. He was a guy that was getting, head coaching talk, right? It was Frank
Yeah.
Smith was a candidate, at one point. So I don't know, which direction they would go and how, like Frank would do things versus how maybe Bobby Slowick would do things, versus maybe how, somebody else would do things,
Yeah, level.
So
Yep.
yeah, it's a tricky one, but again, I hate to kind of lean on that, but that really is what's, stuff that's going on behind closed doors. Those are the details I think we need before we can say it's going to be him. I know I read around and see everybody else and they think it would be Anthony Weaver. I think because he's a kind of a fan favorite, we don't get to see a ton of Frank. He seems like he's maybe a little bit more reserved, but um,
No, I
yeah,
think they make a move in season. I think it's going to be Anthony Weaver that gets the interim head coach role. I'm just saying from a play calling perspective, feels like they have brought guys in that can run Mike's offense, right? Where you're not trying to
I
change
see what
up
you're saying.
things a lot, right? So does it make it almost a little more appealing that you're like, okay, Mike, you can go away. We're going to turn it over to Anthony Weaver as the head guy, and Bobby Slowick. This offense as well as Mike McDaniel does, right? Here's the play call sheet. Have fun.
So yeah, sorry, I misunderstood.
No, all
So to clean it up, yes, the fact that you can move on and feel like you're not scrambling because there's somebody there that can pick up the slack and know everything that most of what he needs to know. Absolutely.
All right. So that's going to wrap it up for today. Probably have a million more questions I could go with, but don't want to keep dragging this on, right? So now we got the complaining out of the way. It's time to be positive. It's going to be 45-0 win this week against the Patriots. Mike McDaniel's going to be the savior again. As always, Anthony, appreciate you coming on. Love having these conversations. Looking forward to do it again. Well, we're going to talk throughout the week, but looking forward to next week's video and hopefully a lot more positive vibes.
Hopefully. Sounds good, buddy. Thanks for having me again. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.